Hi, scholars. I've got a question for you. How do you get your food? Okay, from the grocery store. Mom or dad or someone makes it. I wish my mom still made me lunch. Well, what are some of your favorite foods? Do you see it on this food pyramid? If we take a closer look, we can see that we have animals like this chicken and other meat up here at the top, but almost everything else on this food pyramid is either a plant or made from plants. So even this bread is made from this grain that grows on wheat or another plant. So if almost all the food we eat comes from plants, how do plants get their food? Right. Plants are unique. They make their own food from the sun, energy from the sun, and therefore form the base of every food chain. So we're going to take a little closer look about how plants do this. We know this word here, photosynthesis, is the process plants use to make their own food with energy from the sun. But let's take a closer look at that word. Photo means light, right? So photograph needs light to get developed. Photo means light. Synthesis means how something's made or making something. So photosynthesis is making something from light. Well, just what do plants make from light? We see this word here, glucose. Does anyone know what glucose is? We're going to come back to that. But we do know it's the food that plants make for themselves and the same food that we all depend on. And just like any other animal that eats plants, we depend on that food that they make from their sun. So I want you to pause the video and study this diagram. Come up with a list. What ingredients do plants need to make their own food? Do that now. So were you able to come up with the list of ingredients? Plants need water. Plants need energy from the sun. And plants need carbon dioxide. So if you got all three of those ingredients, kiss your brain. You're exactly right. So, challenge question. Remember we studied animal and plant cells. Who remembers, what do plant cells have that animal cells do not have? There's two extra special things that plant cells have, animal cells do not have. So you remembered the cell wall, right? Who remembers the little green organelle that plant cells have? Starts with a C, chloroplasts. Good. So these little tiny green organelles in plant cells called chloroplasts, these are like the little secret weapon of plants that make their food for them. These are little glucose producing factories in plant cells. If we look here, we see that light hits the chloroplast. Some of that light bounces off, some of the light passes through, but a lot of that light is absorbed as energy for the plant to make its own food. So we see the light energy. These chloroplasts are almost all located on the leaves of the plant. So this light energy is hitting the leaves that are like little solar panels, soaking up that energy from the sun, and also absorbing the carbon dioxide from the air while the roots get the water from the soil. All these things together lead the plant to make glucose. So you might know from your other studies this week, glucose is a form of what? Right, sugar. So plants literally make their own sugar that they use as food, but also anything that eat plants use as food. Now here's a little extra challenge I want you to see if you can stump your family with. Why are plants green? So we know photosynthesis, the process that plants use to make their own food, is dependent on absorbing light from the sun. If we look at this graph here, chlorophyll, which is the main chemical in chloroplast, that part of a plant cell that makes food, we see that this whole wavelength spectrum down here of all the colors of the rainbow, certain wavelengths or colors are absorbed by those plant cells a lot more than other wavelengths. So if you ask your family, why are plants green, and they don't know the answer, you can explain. Plants absorb some colors, like this wavelength of purple and blue light, and this wavelength of red and yellow light. They absorb some colors to use as energy, while if you look here on the green wavelength, it doesn't really absorb it, it reflects it. So the green part of the light spectrum is bounced back or reflected, so we see plants as green. They absorb the other colors to use as energy for their food. So who's going to stump your family this week and ask them, why are plants green? Then explain the answer. So let's go over the raw materials. We know plants need sunlight to make their own food. The leaves are like little solar panels or solar collectors with all the chloroplasts that will absorb the energy from sunlight to make their own food. They need CO2 or carbon dioxide. Plants actually have under their leaves little tiny openings called stomates where the exchange of gases takes place, and it absorbs that CO2, carbon dioxide, to use as an ingredient for its food. Also, we know H2O, water, is taken up from the roots as part of that process. So, what do they make? As we just said, plants, to make their own food, use those ingredients and make glucose, or sugar. Who's tasted a plant that tastes sweet when you eat it? Right? We have fruits. If we eat an orange or an apple or another type of fruit, we have that sweet taste. That's the sugar or glucose the plant made for its own food. Even sweet peppers and other vegetables have that sweet taste. Some plants have more glucose in their fruit or vegetable than others. That's why some taste sweeter than others. Now, other than sugar, which forms the base of all of the food chains, what else do plants make that we definitely need to stay alive? Right, oxygen. So plants produce that oxygen that we need to breathe in order, as a product of when they make their own food. So let's do a quick recap. The ingredients plants need: carbon dioxide, water, and energy from the sun. What they produce: sugar or glucose and oxygen as gas. So here we have it all in a simple formula: CO2 plus H2O plus energy, and then we get sugar, glucose, oxygen, gas. So what's the big idea? What's the connection that we've been studying ecosystems? What does all this have to do with what we've learned so far in this unit? That plants make their own food in the form of sugar, glucose, that is the base of all other life and food chain, right? If we didn't have plants making their own food like this, we wouldn't have herbivores that depend on plants, including us that eat plants to stay alive, and the rest of all life as we know it could not exist without this process of photosynthesis. So we already know that plants grow all over the land, right? When you or I think of plants, we tend to think of grass, trees, flowers. Well, did you know that oceans cover over 70% of our planet? So with all that water, life has evolved longer in the oceans than anywhere else on Earth. A lot of the oxygen we depend on is actually made from tiny plant life in the ocean that actually produces 50 to 85% of the air oxygen we breathe. So these phytoplankton, or tiny plant-like organisms in the ocean, are crucial for life to exist on Earth. So, instructions for assignment. Watch the video on phytoplankton and then answer the questions on the Google form for photosynthesis. Remember, you can always go back. You should go back and check the video on phytoplankton, check this video and slideshow to make sure you have the correct answers. So I can't wait to see your excellent work. Do your very best and see you soon.